All right, so you want the inside scoop on Hurricane Milton? You came to the right place. Articles, satellite images, even evacuation notices. Wow, looks like you haven't skimped on the details. We've got it all here ready to break down this hurricane situation, give you the need to know, and help you sidestep the information overload.
What's wild is how quickly this storm has gone from 0 to 60. We're talking about a hurricane that's gone from a tropical storm to a Category 5 in just 19 hours.
19 hours?
Yeah, like it hit the fast forward button.
You're telling me that's almost unheard of?
It is.
In fact, the last time we saw a storm ramp up that quickly in the Atlantic was Hurricane Ida back in 2020.
Exactly, yeah. To put it into perspective, think about Hurricane Helene, which hit Florida just a few weeks ago. It took 31 hours for that storm to reach Category 4. And remember, Hurricane Ian from 2022, 48 hours to hit that same intensity. Milton is on another level.
So what's the deal with this turbocharged growth? Why is Milton in such a hurry?
It all boils down to the unusually warm water in the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay.
Think of it like this. Warm water is hurricane fuel.
Right.
And unfortunately, climate change is cranking up the heat, literally making these waters like an all-you-can-eat buffet for hurricanes.
And get this. For the first time since records began, we've got 3 hurricanes happening at the same time in the Atlantic after September. Milton's stealing the show, but Leslie is still out there brewing, and Kirk just got downgraded. Talk about an active hurricane season.
It's certainly keeping us on our toes. Speaking of, Milton, as of this afternoon, Monday, is a Category 5 hurricane with winds whipping around at 175 miles per hour. It's currently moving east at a relatively slow 9 miles per hour, about 735 miles southwest of Tampa.
Okay, so it's slow and steady, but where's it steady on? What's the latest on where it's headed?
The latest models show Milton making landfall on Florida's Gulf Coast sometime on Wednesday.
Right in the middle of the week.
Yeah.
And while it might simmer down a bit before then, the prediction is still a major hurricane, possibly a Category 3.
Yes, and early projections show it hitting a different part of Florida than Hurricane Helene, which is a small mercy for those still picking up the pieces.
Okay, so different part of Florida, but still a major hurricane. Let's talk about what that means. What kind of impact are we looking at here?
Well, the big one with any hurricane is storm surge, that wall of water that gets pushed ashore.
Right.
And with Milton, we've got a storm surge watch in effect for coastal southwest Florida. Projections show potentially catastrophic surges of 5 to 10 feet for Lee and Charlotte counties.
5 to 10 feet.
And some areas could see up to 12 feet.
12 feet. That's taller than my car.
It's a massive amount of water. And we're also anticipating heavy rainfall across a good chunk of Florida. We're talking totals of 5 to 10 inches, with some areas potentially getting as much as 15 inches.
So not just the coast then. This is inland flooding too.
Exactly, yeah. That much rain brings a serious risk of flash flooding, urban flooding, you name it. And we also have to be mindful of potential river flooding as well.
Right. And then there's the wind impact too, right?
Right. Hurricane watches, storm surge watches, and tropical storm watches and warnings are in effect for parts of Florida's west coast.
So lots of watches and warnings, potential flooding, even far inland. Sounds like it's time to review the evacuation plan.
Couldn't agree more. Multiple counties in southwest Florida have already issued mandatory evacuation orders.
And who exactly do those orders apply to?
Primarily those in zones A and B, which are the most vulnerable areas. Think mobile homes, manufactured housing, and those low-lying spots that tend to flood first.
For folks who might not know their zones off the top of their head, any advice?
Absolutely. You can actually find your specific evacuation zone, along with a ton of other essential hurricane information, right on the NBC2 website. That's NBC the number 2. It's a lifesaver, especially during hurricane season.
Bookmarking that one myself. Now, for those who need to evacuate, are there shelters opening up?
Yes, a number of shelters are getting ready across the affected counties, including options for people with pets and those with special needs. So they're really trying to make sure everyone has a safe place to go.
That's good to hear. Now, I know Florida's Emergency Management Director, Kevin Guthrie, has been pretty upfront about the dangers of storm surge,
Right.
even saying that drowning deaths from it are 100% preventable if people just evacuate.
He's absolutely right. And on a practical note, he also pointed out that you don't necessarily have to travel hundreds of miles to get out of harm's way. Sometimes a friend's place further inland or even a hotel can do the trick.
It's about getting to a safe place, period. Now, what about those who might be just outside the areas under evacuation orders? Are they off the hook?
Not necessarily, no. Remember that cone of uncertainty we talked about earlier? It shows the potential paths Hurricane Milton might take. but things can change.
So it's like a rough guide, not a set-in-stone route.
Exactly. Even if you're a bit outside the cone, you could still see some effects from Milton, heavy rain and flooding being the big ones.
So no letting your guard down completely. What should people be doing to prepare, even if they're not in an evacuation zone?
Information is key. Stay informed and up to date on the latest advisories from the National Hurricane Center. They're your best source for real-time information.
And beyond staying informed, what else? Should people be stocking up on supplies, boarding up windows, that kind of thing?
Absolutely, yeah. It's
Okay.
better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, right?
Words to live by, especially during hurricane season. What kind of supplies are we talking about here?
The essentials, A week's worth of food and water for everyone in your household. Flashlights, batteries, first aid kit, any medications you or your family members need.
Oh yeah, it's easy to forget about medications until you need them. What about those hurricane shutters? Are those a must-do, even if you're not directly in Milton's path?
Well, it depends. If you're in an evacuation zone, your priority is getting out safely, shutters or no shutters. But if you're further inland and think you can weather the storm safely at home, putting up those shutters or boarding up windows can definitely help protect your home from wind damage.
Good to know. We've talked a lot about the practicalities of prepping for a hurricane, but I think it's also important to acknowledge the emotional toll these storms can take. A lot of folks along this projected path are still reeling from Hurricane Helene. It's like they're facing a 1-2 punch.
You're absolutely right. It's stressful enough dealing with one hurricane, let alone two in such a short time frame. Those anxieties about potential damage, disruption, and the sheer uncertainty of it all, those are very real and valid concerns.
Absolutely. It's important to acknowledge those feelings and find healthy ways to cope. Reaching out to loved ones, practicing self-care, even just taking a break from the constant news cycle, those things can make a difference.
They really can. And speaking of the bigger picture, I think Hurricane Milton, especially its rapid intensification, is a bit of a wake-up call about the impact of climate change on our weather.
How so?
Think of it like this. Warmer ocean water is rocket fuel for hurricanes. And with climate change making those waters warmer, we're essentially setting the stage for more intense, unpredictable storms like Milton.
So it's not just a matter of dealing with these storms as they come. It's also about addressing the root causes that are making them more powerful.
Exactly. It's about adaptation and mitigation. We need to adapt to the reality of more frequent and intense hurricanes, but we also need to mitigate the effects of climate change to hopefully prevent these storms from becoming even more extreme.
So it's a two-pronged approach, preparing for the storms we know are coming while also working to lessen the impact of future ones.
Exactly. And that brings us back to something we touched on earlier, resilience. Building more resilient communities and infrastructure is key to weathering these storms, both literally and figuratively.
What does that look like in practical terms? Are we talking tougher building codes, better evacuation routes, that kind of thing?
All of that and more. Stronger buildings that can withstand higher winds, improved drainage systems to reduce flooding, better communication networks so people can stay informed during emergencies, those are all part of it. But it also goes beyond the physical stuff.
What do you mean?
It's about fostering a sense of community so people are there for each other when disaster strikes. It's about having those support systems in place so people can recover and rebuild more quickly.
So it's that combination of being prepared and being there for each other both before and after the storm.
Exactly.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the nuts and bolts of hurricane preparedness to the bigger picture of climate change and building more resilient communities.
It's all connected, isn't it?
It really is. As we wrap up, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this deep dive?
I think it boils down to this. Knowledge is power. The more you understand about hurricanes, the risks they pose, and the steps you can take to prepare, the better equipped you'll be to weather the storm, whatever form it takes. So, stay informed, be prepared, and most importantly, stay safe.
Great advice to end on. And remember, you can find a ton of additional resources and information at State Emergency Management website. Stay safe out there.